I've got a confession to make, and that's first of all that I don't have keratoconus. Okay, and so this was the inspiration for the title. Really, was just coming here and talking to you. And talking with you was really about learning about your experiences and believing that as we reshape keratoconus service design, as we enter a new era, it's really about understanding what you as patients, as experts in the disease, have to tell those of us who serve you in cornea clinics. And I want to really thank Anne and John for asking me along. It's really nice to be here. This is my first meeting. I hope it won't be the last, so thank you. And there's also another really special person to thank as well. So Professor Martin Rubenstein, who's already been thanked before, I'm really grateful to for being my pre-reg supervisor when I was 21 in Nottingham. And the reason I'm particularly grateful is because when I was in contact lens clinic once, I did the absolute unthinkable. And I was changing somebody's lens, and I dropped it, and then I moved my foot, and then I heard the crunch, and I just wanted the earth to just swallow me up. And it was probably a pivotal moment. You know, I mean, can you imagine, like, your optician just standing in your lens? Like, imagine, I can't believe I wasn't punched by the patient, who took it quite well, actually. And I had to go next door to Martin and knock on the door. And I'm sure I was white, you know. Oh, Martin. And he just looked at me and he said, "You've stood in the lens, haven't you?" I stood in the lens. And I think you said it won't be the last time. And it hasn't happened since. So, yeah, you know, I'm sure he'll ask me again in 10 years' time. So, as I said, I don't have keratoconus, but I want to use this opportunity as well to learn from you. And so for those of you who are here who do have keratoconus, you've all got sheets in your packs. I'd be really grateful if you could take out a plain sheet of paper, and as we go through, write down what your most frustrating thing is about having keratoconus, and just write it down, and you can just leave it under your seat, because I'm just collecting insights, and I really want to get what your frustrating thing is, and I won't read them out. So I've always been interested in keratoconus because I believe that when we see better, we live better, and I think it's really clear that in keratoconus, the small difference in seeing better makes a big difference in living better, and that's backed up by science. But I think, as Wahida said earlier, really care. And those of us in keratoconus are usually very passionate, and I want to, you know, just tell you how much we care. In Bristol, I work part-time in Bristol Eye Hospital, and we've spent a year getting rid of our waiting list, which was quite long. We were doing evening clinics. We were doing, you know, over 12-hour days, which, you know, as an optician is a lot. You know, I know as a doctor it's probably not. But for us, that was, you know, really big deal, and we're really driving hard to improve the service there. You know, and there's patients who I have met at Bristol, at Cardiff, and when I was at Nottingham, who've really moved me and changed the way that I think about keratoconus and think about this condition, and giving that drive to do something. There's been times when my patients have totally moved me to tears, whether or not it's in front of them, probably not, but I just want you guys to know when you're having those frustrating experiences in ophthalmology, as we did talk about, the people that, you know, are working there are really moved and desperately want to improve care. And I don't think you're demanding, because I'm really demanding as well. And I'm probably, you know, one of the people who'll shout out and say, no, we do need to do better. We do need to be supporting patients more. And I think that young people, especially young people with keratoconus, have an absolute right to the very best care that we can get. And that is about working together to work out exactly what it is that you need. So originally in this, we were going to talk about quality of life and, you know, why the emphasis on quality of life. Now we know that quality of life in keratoconus is actually a problem. And it's more of a problem, I think, than what people wanted to believe before. Also important because there are better treatments, and there are also more expensive treatments. And cross-linking is relatively cheap, but there are many things going on that are becoming more expensive, and it's really important that we can know that we're making an actual difference. I think Amit said this earlier. We need to know that we're making a measurable difference, not just to somebody's vision, but in terms of somebody's quality of life. Also, because we're moving towards more personalised care, and we're going to see really exciting things over the next 5 years in keratoconus. So we've really got to know the individual circumstances, better than ever. The other reason I think emphasis on quality of life is really important is because we can now, in the 21st century, talk about mental health, and this is really exciting because patients with keratoconus have been suffering with anxiety and depression more than what we realise, and the estimates are about 50%. And now that we can talk about that, I think that's quite freeing, and it builds the ability to be able to structure quality of life surveys and assessments in a much better way that's more patient-driven. And finally, the other reason that we need to concentrate on quality of life in keratoconus is because the numbers when we scan the eye and when we measure vision are a bit rubbish and a bit variable. And you don't need to tell me that depending on what way you move your head, the numbers could read completely differently. And I spent my PhD in Cardiff on keratoconus, taking scans of people's eyes and trying to understand what made a good quality scan. And there was just a lot of variability in the data. But the one thing that we do know is that whenever we combine measurements of vision with measurements of scanning the eye with other measures, and I think including quality of life, we can get a better picture of how someone's doing clinically and what it is, what intervention, if we need to make an intervention there. So, how is quality of life measured? Why is it important? There's loads of questionnaires, really, and that's the basis for how quality of life is currently measured. I think with the advent of artificial intelligence, we're going to get other ways to measure quality of life. And that's really interesting. They're talking about having little apps that sit in the background that monitor your interaction with technology, including maybe what you're looking at on Facebook or Google, and frequencies and times of day that can give an indication of somebody's mood and somebody's lifestyle that actually isn't obvious on the surface. So right now we're using good old questionnaires. And in Bristol Eye Hospital, I managed to get a small amount of money to start understanding better patients who are living with keratoconus, looking at their quality of life and really trying to understand what we need to do to our service to better meet the needs. And not just trying to improve somebody's visual acuity on the chart, but just trying to improve somebody's vision. So what does the current vision science literature say about quality of life? I'm going to tell you a few things that you totally already know. But in keratoconus, quality of life is not well represented by clinical measures. So if I get you to read the eye chart, that does not represent how well you're doing. Would you agree? Yes. So it's not directly related to visual acuity in keratoconus, but what we do know is if you can't read the bottom half of the eye chart, then your quality of life is likely to be worse. That's a self-reported quality of life. And the other thing that I'm really passionate about in keratoconus, which isn't the case in loads of other eye diseases, and might account for a poor quality of life, is actually because ocular pain is a big issue. You've got an eye that's not very happy, ocular surface problem, and then we stick a contact lens on it, it just gets a bit unhappier, doesn't it? And that is not represented by the eye chart. It's not that discomfort and that pain, and also the variability of your vision on a day-to-day basis isn't well represented by the measures that we use clinically, and that's something that we need to work on. So I want a couple of quotes from the scientific literature. The data indicates that keratoconus patients perceive a loss of life function that's disproportionate to that reflected by the clinical measures such as visual acuity on the eye chart. This may reflect a perception of disability that extends beyond visual impairment. You know what that last bit means? It may reflect a perception of disability that extends beyond visual impairment. So 2 ways of reading into that. Either whoever wrote this paper said you're making it all up and you're being more disabled than what you need to be. That's one way to read. The other reason is to say, actually, You know, people who have keratoconus are a very special group of people, and actually the situation in their lives mean that actually they are more disabled by a condition than if that person was older, for example. And we know that because young people who've got keratoconus and older people who've got keratoconus, you know, often are still working, still need to work, still need to drive, you know, and may need to look after children. And so that's why I'm really passionate about keratoconus, because I get to work with a group of people who are very much in the prime of their lives. And I feel this is why we need to pay particular resources to looking after vision and quality of life in people with keratoconus, because actually you guys are still contributing to society in so many different ways. And I think that this is not reflected in official statistics about sight loss, is it? You know, it really, really isn't. And that's something that together we need to work to improve. So that's what the science says, you know, and I want to focus now on what do people living with keratoconus like you say, you know? And this is what the basis of our project will be at Bristol, to understand that the whole purpose is to understand what you need better. So currently we have clinics that revolve around contact lens appointments, monitoring for keratoconus progression appointments. But what we want to do is to say, is that the right thing for you? You might say, yes, that's all I need, and that's fine. But if we need to do things more widely, if we need to be better connected to other services, such as having keratoconus low vision specific services or pediatric keratoconus services specifically that liaise with schools, then that's what we need to do. The other reason that we're doing the research at Bristol is to plan for future research. And I spent a lot of time staying up in the lab until 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, with numbers, plugging numbers into spreadsheets and getting samples, you know, trying to make samples of collagen work. But the truth is actually that research needs to be directed. You know, we heard this in the previous talk. Research needs to be directed by patients and what the true needs of patients are, and to a large extent that really needs to come from you, and that's really exciting. So our plan in Bristol is to focus. We're doing focus groups. That will lead on to a questionnaire which is specific around patients with keratoconus, and then we're going to develop a work out what strategies need to be implemented in the short term in NHS clinics, the easy things that we can do that aren't too much of a financial or time burden, the things that we can do to support you better. We know that those are there. And then also we're going to develop into a longer term clinical strategy, work with the hospitals more closely in the UK so that we can be more aligned in our approach. And then also get a research plan that is driven by and large by patient need. So what am I sniffing at here? Some of the things I was asked to say, well, what might come out of it at the end? And as a researcher, you're really not allowed to do this, speculate what might happen. But I want to get your opinion as we go through. But what I'm really sensing so far is that we need improved communication of information. You know, so to learn from you how it is that you want your information, what kind of information you want, at what part, you know, depending on what stage you are at the condition. And also because, you know, we've got a new generation of people living with keratoconus now who won't necessarily need grafts and other more serious interventions, and that's really exciting. So I'm sorry to those of you, you know, who are more you know, further along in the condition or perhaps older and haven't had the benefit of the things that we're able to provide now early on in the condition. But we really do need to personalise information, because the kind of stats that were available and the stuff that's available online is relevant for some people but not others. And the other thing as well that's come up is the idea of expert patients. I know you guys are expert patients, you know, because you're here, but really I think, you know, we need to look at how we group patients, especially in the early stages of diagnosis. And obviously the keratoconus support group is the way to do that. All of our patients in Bristol get information about this group. One of them's here today. But we really need to build on that more locally. We definitely need to do that more at Bristol. And we also need to investigate whether or not we need to put other measures within the hospital, such as like a buddy system, especially for contact lens insertion and like removal teaching, because I feel a bit of a fraud when I'm teaching patients how to put in scleral lenses. You know, we look at YouTube videos together and we kind of plug through together, and I feel like there's better ways to do this, and that's what I want to find out from yourselves. So in terms of future research direction, in Bristol we're looking at the moment at what associated health conditions there may be with keratoconus. So in the scientific literature, there's been stuff talked about mitral valve prolapse, collagen conditions such as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Understanding our patients and categorizing patients better whenever you come to ophthalmology, when we ask about loads of other things in your body, that helps us to begin associating what other conditions come together, and that builds on the future to do research with genetic sampling that we may move closer towards finding those genes that have gone wrong, ones that we can then fix in the future. I don't think that all keratoconus patients are made the same, and there may be more than one type of keratoconus, and this is something that we're very much thinking about at Bristol. So our patients who do have connective tissue problems, whereby they might have hyperextending limbs or muscles, is that the same as people who suffer really badly with allergies? You know, is that the same kind of keratoconus? Do we end up at the same point? This is what we're looking at the moment on quite an informal basis. So over to you. I've talked enough. I think we've got a couple of roaming mics as well, and there's a few things I want to ask you about. So I don't know, is there anybody who can help?
John want to take one, and the two Johns. So can we have some questions?
Well, I've got some questions for you first.
You've got some questions?
Is that all right?
Yeah,
I've got questions for you first. Right. This is the first one. Does anybody know who that is? Keratoconus, because nobody here has got keratoconus. We've all got keratoconus. And I want to ask you about what you think about the term keratoconus, you know, because whenever... It's terrible, isn't it? Oh, it's really embarrassing when I have to, like, pronounce it really slowly to people who've received a new diagnosis and then spell it out. So has anybody got, can we pass the microphones around to anybody who's got a comment that they want to say about the name of the condition? Because I wonder if it's a barrier to people feeling part of it, you know, feeling that they can easily access information. You know, should we be calling it KC? You know, when we talk amongst ourselves, what should we be doing? I'd really love your opinions, if anybody feels happy to give one.
As no one's saying anything yet, I'll just say one quick thing. First time when you get diagnosed, you want to look it up on the internet and you can't spell it.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Get the ball rolling anyway.
Yeah. Thankfully, Anne sent me 1 million keratoconus script leaflets, so I hope, you know, that's spelled right in the front, but...
I had to keep checking every time, preparing these papers now. I have to keep checking. I'm doing a website, I had to keep checking that I've spelled it right.
Because even autocorrect doesn't like it, does it?
No, and I get the vowels in the wrong order. The A and the E reversed. K-A-R-E or something like that. So.
As you think we've got wrong, because I have polyarthritis nodosa. They have the same thing. That's abbreviated to PAN. So I tell everyone that I've got PAN and KC.
Yeah.
We just say it's KC because we've both got it, KC, and my twin sister has. So we just say KC makes it much easier than keratoconus, and yeah.
And if as health professionals and researchers we need to be accessible in that, you know, especially for people who are new, then that's what, you know, we just want to hear from you guys. You know, this is what we're going to be doing at Bristol, but perhaps we can do it at a larger extent with Keratoconus group, with yourselves too. This is the first question that we had. Anybody else want to throw the hat in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say Casey actually makes it sound good, like cool and trendy. So. And also, I felt like Keratoconus sounds like a spell from Harry Potter. I don't know. Yeah, that's it.
Maybe we can use that in our marketing.
Does it clash with anything else, KC? Does it? I can't think of anything else that's...
Yeah, I would say on
really?
a more
As long as it's not dodgy on the internet, then that's fine.
on a more serious note, when you're trying to explain what you've got and you say the long keratoconus, it does switch people off from, say, they go, oh, it sounds long and complicated, and they stop actually. Yeah, that just ends it with a long, complicated name, and they switch off from anything else you say. There's a problem I find with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just add the number of people who you have to explain it to so many times, the name doesn't help at all, and nobody's heard of it outside of this very small group.
We need to do a little bit of work, don't we, around, you know, some messages, some communication that, you know, from all different areas that we can put out to explain it better. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Early episode of Lewis where his sergeant goes into the optician and comes out having been diagnosed as having cone eyes.
Oh, God. What do you think about that?
That's worse.
Okay.
Yeah, when you get the lower levels of the health professionals like the phlebotomists and those checking your diabetes and they've never heard of it, something that would be more of a name might be useful.
I was hoping that we'd actually be able to show the video clip. I don't know if people saw the quiz programme where they had the best junior doctors in the country. Did anyone see this? Oh, and I mean, Anne, I know, has seen it. But basically, they put up just a picture of a keratoconus eye, and I was screaming at the television, you know, at home to my wife. And these junior, they did not actually get it. So you know, it's never mind the general population. The best junior doctors in the country did not know what it was.
Some GPs don't know.
No. Okay. So the other thing I want to ask you as well about is, you know, visual impairment. You know, what terminology do people want to be referred to? You know, do you feel, and maybe this is completely different for some people and not others. You know, we had a fantastic talk about low vision earlier, and, you know, Mary was, you know, really, you know, moving towards this real need that we have, you know, about the eye chart not being the most sensitive to, you know, to the vision loss that you experience. Is you know, for you, is it visual impairment? Do you feel as though you want to be part of a blind society, or is there, you know, what terminology should be used? Should we be communicating? You know, in some ways you want to be able to express, you know, suffering, and on the other hand you want to feel like a normal person. So I wonder if anybody has any particular views about that, because this is one of the things we're going to be looking at in Bristol.
Well, I'll say one thing. For a lot of people, we are temporarily vision impaired. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. And you can't be put in one camp. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Hello. For me, vision impaired or vision disabled is fine. I hate the term visually impaired. It sounds ugly. You know, when I lived in London, I've said, the view walking across Hackney Marshes is visually impaired by the sight of Canary Wharf sticking up like a sore thumb. That's what visually impaired means to me. I agree entirely about we're part-time blind, and I think not only terminology, but the law needs to take account of that. Going back to the past one, I never had any problem with keratoconus, the name, because when I was first introduced to it, I was maybe lucky enough to meet somebody who actually could explain what it actually meant and its etymological derivation and where the words came from. And interestingly enough, I now find words of the same etymology, kerato, whatever it is, used to do with horses' hooves. So you get things like keratex is something you paint on horses' hooves to strengthen them.
Maybe that's a good alternative to cross-linking. Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting going into a shop, you know, you'll go into Sainsbury's or wherever, and they move the shelves, and you have no idea where that stuff is. And you'll say, excuse me, where are the chocolate biscuits? And they'll say, oh, aisle 12, down there. You have no clue. You can't see that it's aisle 12. And then they say, go down aisle 12, you'll find them. And then if you say to them, but I've got low vision, they then take your arm and they take you down and show exactly where the McVitie's chocolate biscuits are. And it's really interesting how their attitude changes as soon as you use those two words, low vision. The same at the station. Could you tell me where the train is? Oh, it's up on the board. I said, I can't read the boards. And then they'll help you.
Who knows those words with low vision? What 2 words is the best to use?
I personally find that I have always wanted to be as normal as the others, as anyone else, kind of just getting on with daily things, like just everyday jobs. But when I struggle and I have to take my eyes out for whatever reason, I've had them in too long or whatever, and around the house I have everything in a specific place because I know where it is. If anything gets moved, I almost sort of feel sort of a little panicked because I don't know where it is. So I completely agree about going to a shop and they've moved something. You know where something specifically is, and when it's been moved, and you kind of either rely on sort of more figures and shapes or something like that, colours, it's a lot harder to find. And yes, that's when I kind of feel more visually impaired. So, yeah.
Completely dependent on the circumstance, isn't it? And I think we do need to do some, we probably need to, we'll see what the research says, we probably need to do some work around this and how we communicate. And I think somebody touched on a really good point about the, legally, about being visually impaired. Mary talked about this earlier. We can't register everybody. And actually, do you know what? That's a huge and massive problem because we can't register everybody who is visually suffering, part-time, full-time. Then those statistics aren't made official. And I emailed, whenever a registration of visual impairment is made, I emailed the guys in London to say how many corneal registrations or keratoconus, because keratoconus isn't necessarily labelled as a specific visual impairment. That's problem number one. The second one is obviously people aren't being registered, and the numbers were really tiny over like the last few years. I can't remember what they were.
So isn't the problem, if you're registered, you can't unregister?
You can. You can be unregistered.
Well, that's what we were told previously, that you couldn't.
You can unregister, and that's a big problem because if a patient is waiting, for a grant, I think some doctors feel like they can't register a patient, and we've definitely culturally got to get confident with registering people for short term.
I mean, it's one of my bugbears that consultants often won't register somebody with keratoconus temporarily, and that's what we need to be able to access things. We're waiting for a corneal graft, or we've had a hydrops or whatever, and you need to be able to access help quickly, and you can't because nobody will register you because, we're going to be able to solve the problem in 12 months' time. Well, yeah, fine, but what do I do in the meantime? And the other thing I just wanted to come back to is this idea of part-time partially sighted, which is a phrase that we've often used. And I don't know why people find it such a hard thing to get their heads around, because we're by no means the only condition that has that. I'm sure Fuchs dystrophy is exactly the same. You can't see in the mornings, we can't see at night. There are people with multiple sclerosis. There are all sorts of conditions with fluctuating levels of sight. And why can't the authorities get their heads around the fact that at times when we can't see, we need help?
A point that Katie made, she just talked about, I take my eyes out. And that's what I say. And I think probably a lot of us, our contact lenses are our eyes. And, that speaks volumes.
And I want to bring that point back to the clinic because patients will often come and say to me, how am I doing? How's my vision? And I think what we need to get more towards is, I'm bringing this back to expert patients. You are the expert on your vision. You need to be able to say, this is what my vision is like in the morning, but I'm suffering in the evening, or no, everything's fine, it hasn't changed. I think that's really, really important, that actually where you feel you can communicate, your vision stability or not stability, that you really feel confident to say, actually, half of the day I can't see, you know, and that we really start pushing this message with all the clinicians that this is a real thing, you know, because it used to be the idea of getting somebody into a contact lens just so they could go to work, and this was spoken about earlier. You know, I remember, I think I was quite newly qualified when somebody said to me, well, yeah, Steph, that's fine, but actually I can't cook dinner for my kids when I go home. You know, so really, you know, I think we just need to get talking about that a bit more. I'll speed up just to whiz through. I wanted to talk here about information, you know, so what is it that you need to know? And it's part of the work we're looking at in Bristol, like I said, is to understand how can we provide more customised information about diagnosis, explanation, how much do you want? You know, because some people want everything. Some people actually just want to know just what they need to know. Can I still drive? Fine, yeah, my symptoms, you know, they haven't got too many symptoms. And they don't want to know too much. So this is very important that we find out a way to customise information. And I know Moorfields are doing a fantastic project about trying to stratify risks for an individual. And as that comes through, we're going to need more personalised information. Okay, I'm just going to move on from that one to just, eye chart. I mean, this is such a terrible way to measure your vision, isn't it? Isn't this just so completely terrible? And I can't believe that we're still stuck there. If it is that we need to design better ways to measure vision in keratoconus, then that's what we need to do. And this might just be me that thinks this, but I'm really excited as we go through research in Bristol and hopefully wider to find out a little bit more about what patients feel is representative of their vision and not. And the other thing is depression and keratoconus. This is something that really we need to drive more research into in order to support people with anxiety and depression much better. That was the thing that really came out of that quality of life work. You know, that uncertainty. Is my job occupation okay for me to be, you know, to keep doing? What about driving? This uncertainty about the future is something that may be helped with information, but it might not be. And how can we look at strategies of support that help our patients with living rather than just seeing? And this one's about research. I came across this and I just love this picture, and I feel like this is all of you with keratoconus, you know, under the microscope. We really want to know what research would you like to be done? What's most important to you? You know, and that is really where you come in as an expert. Patients. I think we've talked about, you know, personalised care. And this is a question that's really been in my mind for a couple of years. Is there a gold standard of keratoconus care to be developed? And if it is, what could that look like? You know, what could it look like and feel like going into an eye clinic? And we've heard today about some great changes that have been going on in NHS. And, you now know that the people are behind you to keep pushing that. And the more that we make positive suggestions about this is what would really make a difference to me in clinic, the quicker that we're going to get it. And I just want to leave you with this slide. And we can do it. I think we do need to raise the profile of keratoconus. And it is about working together and being led by what patients, want and need. So thank you. And I'll be excited to update you about our research in Bristol when it's finished. Thank you
very much.